Well, Jay has been trying to set this spot. I don't know what was necessary.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, well, thank y'all for coming.
I'm going to do a real informal introduction because Kerrelyn's been coming to us for a while, so I think we all kind of know who she is. Kerrelyn Sparks is a local treasure. If this is your first time seeing her here, welcome. Thank you for joining us, virtual attendees. This may be the first time you're seeing her here because we don't know where you're from. We are really excited to be able to have in-store events again, and I'm really excited that Kerrelyn is one of our first back. We've been doing her launch parties for a long time, longer than I've been here. 34 books now, full-length books, is that correct?
No, now you're making me feel lazy. I think this is number 26.
Sorry. That doesn't sound lazy to me though. So. But she's here today for When a Princess Proposes. It's the 6th book in the Embraced by Magic series. If you are just looking at the number of the series, it is confusing, but it's the first in a new story arc set 20 years after the last book. So if you're joining the series here, it's a great place to start, but you're going to want to go back and read the first 5 too. So thank you all for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kerrelyn.
Well, thank you, Anna. Yeah, it's real fun to be back, and it feels very strange to be back because, you know, we've all been in hiding for so long, but it's so nice to be out again and actually see faces and talk to people. Still hiding at home behind the computer. Anna was talking about this book that just is out today, When the Princess Proposes, and it is 20 years set ahead from the last book. If you haven't read the first 5 in the series, I mean, you'll probably be fine with this one because it is this is the first book in the time after the time jump. It's the parents you won't know, you know, who are all these parents, but they actually all have their own book in the first 5 Embraced books. And there's also a lot of confusion a lot of times with the Embrace series or Embraced by Magic. So I'll touch on that really quickly. When I sold the Embrace series, I sold 3 books to St. Martin's Press. And but I always intended to do 5 books because there are 5 sisters, so it would be a book per sister. And after the first 3 books, St. Martin said, well, we don't want to do that anymore. Why don't you go back to doing vampires? And I mean, I have nothing against vampires. I've lived with them for years with the Love and Snake, but I didn't want to leave this series in the lurch. Because people were waiting for the last 2 sisters, and there, of course, there was the big buildup. You have to defeat the villain. You just don't want to leave this hanging. So I was determined to go ahead and finish that series, the Embrace series, with the last 2 books for the last 2 sisters. Even if I needed to self-publish, I was going to do it one way or another. I was determined to do it. But my agent shopped around, and Kensington offered to finish off the series. So that's why if you see the first 3 and the last 2, very different look. Yeah, the first 3 are mass market paperback, and the last 2 from Kensington are trade paperback, a whole different size and a different look.
Yeah.
And of course, for copyright reasons, Kensington couldn't continue to call it the Embrace series because that's what St. Martin's Press had called it. So they called it Embraced by Magic, since the name would be close enough, people could connect them. And of course, then on my website and places like Amazon, they link them together as one series, so that helps people realize it is the same series, even though it has a different name. So to Kensington, this is book number 3. I mean, according to them, because that's their 3rd book. They don't care what St. Martin's Press did. So, but for us that are just reading the series and not paying any attention to who published it, this would be book number 6. The 5 sisters have had their books, and now we're jumping ahead 20 years, and this is the oldest of the grandchildren, Eviana. She's King Leo and Luciana's daughter. If you've read the first 5 books, you met her. Let's see, she was born during So I Married a Sorcerer during Brigida's book. She was born then, and Luciana had twins on a night that was embraced. I mean, the two moons eclipsed, and so she knew both those twins were going to be embraced. And then the third book, the dragon book, was Silas and Gwenor. That book, at the time, Eviana, her twin brother, were 3 years old. In fact, it was their birthday. And Eviana was kidnapped. She was by a dragon. He swooped down and took her off. And Gwenor jumped on, held on, and went with them to try to protect the little girl. But she was 3 years old at the time. And so now it's 20 years later, and she's 23. And so that is what you know of Eviana at this point. And we know she's embraced, but no one knows what her power is. And it's actually a big secret. And Quentin, we met him in book 5, The Siren in the Deep Blue Sea. That was the big finale of that story with the chameleon and all those bad guys, the Circle of Five. You had the final big battle and all that at the sea, and Brody and Maeve, they were the hero and heroine of that book, and they went to the Isle of Secrets to try to find the Circle of Five and the chameleon and so forth, and defeat them. And on that island, they discovered that the Circle of Five had been taking embraced babies from the mainland, taking them over to the Isle of Secrets and raising them in secret, and raising them to be an embraced army so they could help them take over the world. That embraced army, they've been taken over as children, and they were raised there. Most of them were still children. I think the oldest one was 19. So they were still actually children when the battle began. They were not expecting to be discovered there on the island that quickly. They weren't ready yet. They were still training those kids and waiting for them to grow up. And but they were discovered, and the good guys moved in to attack. And so Quentin was on that island, and at the time I think he was 8 or 9 years old, or 7. He was young. He was still young. Didn't even know what his embrace gift was going to be yet. And so now that it's 20, I think he was 9. He took part in the battle. He was kind of a wisecracking little rascally kid on that island. But now, 20 years later, his embrace gift is he's an eagle shifter. So he's become the main spy for all the royal families. He flies around to all the royal families, delivers messages from one royal family to another, and spies on everybody and gives them information and so forth.
And he took over Brady's job.
Excuse me?
He took up Brady's job.
Yeah. He took over Brody's job. And so he's 29, I guess, then, and Eviana's 23. And the book starts with, it's a birthday party. Leo's turning 51. And so Quentin is there, but kind of in hiding, and he's been in love with Eviana for several years, for 6 years. But he keeps it a secret. Because it turned out once he came back, once the Circle of Five was defeated, and those children that were on the Isle of Secrets were able to go back home. They tried to find their homes for their families to take them back, and they discovered that, well, Quentin, he was an illegitimate son of a stable hand and a scullery maid, and they didn't even want him. And the mom had married and had 5 other children that were normal, didn't want anything to do with him. And so he, luckily, he was taken in by King Silas and Gwenor at Norveshka. So he grew up there, and they took care of him and raised him, and he learned to he took his flying lessons with the dragons, but he was an eagle. And but as the son of servants, of course, he does not feel, even though he's fallen for a princess. Of course, he doesn't feel like he's at all suitable for her. And so that's the problem with Quentin there, is he's madly in love with Eviana, but he does not feel that he is worth her. And Eviana, so you'll notice the book in the title, when a princess proposes, Eviana is really the one pushing for the whole relationship, because Quentin is always, no, I'm not worthy kind of a guy. And so Eviana is the one who proposes and makes several propositions to Quentin. So it was a fun switching around, because she's really, usually in the books, the guy is in the more powerful position, and he's courting the woman and pursuing her. And this was kind of reverse. The princess is the one who is in the more powerful position, and she's the one doing all the pursuing. And so that was a fun switch around there. And I also I had fun writing this one, because really, if you think of the original 5 sisters, they were all raised in a convent on an island and didn't even know who they really were. They were raised there, and so being raised by a bunch of nuns and not expecting ever to get off that island, they were raised very naive and innocent and completely unprepared for the adventures that hit them later on. But these girls, of course, now they're all queens. The 5 sisters are queens of the 5 different kingdoms. And of course, they raised their daughters to be strong and confident. And so it was nice to have a gang of girls now that they're tough. And like right now, I'm working on the next one, and it's going to be the princess from Norveshka, who is the first dragon shifter the world has ever seen. Usually it's only men. So she's very strong and powerful and confident and tough. And she's been raised, she's trained with the army. So she's actually a soldier. So it's a much different, this jumping ahead 20 years, this new generation, these girls are a lot tougher than their moms ever were. And the moms raised them that way, though. They want their daughters to be tough, because they realized, when they were going through their adventures, they were not prepared for it. And so they want their daughters to be tough and prepared. And so it made it a little bit different this time around with these girls. But I was proud of them, and I think y'all as the readers will enjoy having these stronger heroines. Anything else I should touch on?
Well, I'm kind of curious what the plan is for this. Like, so you said there was going to be a second book that you're working on. Is there a plan for how many this, like you knew you wanted 5 for the first portion of?
Yeah, well, I had no idea I would ever be doing a second generation. Really, when I finished the 5th book, The Siren in the Deep Blue Sea, I put the whole thing out of my mind, and I was going to try. Actually, my next proposal was a totally different series, and I really thought I was saying goodbye to the Embrace series, and but Kensington was begging me to do more, because remember, they only got to do the last 2, and they wanted more. And I said, well, I'm out of sisters. Who's gonna be? But they had all these children, and I thought, well, okay, I'll have to jump ahead. But gosh, now
How many children are there?
I had them kept having all these babies in the first 5 books. I didn't realize that would come back to haunt me. Now that there's all these children, and there's no way really I'm going to do a book per child, because they all had several children. Let's see, Luciana and Everon. Luciana, she has 3 children. Rapita's had 2. Gunor's has 2. And Sorcia's 3. And Maeve had 2. Really, that's not for that time period, you know, where people like a medieval time where they have 12 children. Really, I was really trying to cut it short, but still, you know, that's not what 12 or more kids. No, that's not going to happen.
First series had 16 books.
Yeah, and I won't live that long. Oh gosh, I'm getting older. Yeah. No, so really what I'm trying to do, like this one, I've actually been doing this throughout quite a bit of this series, having a secondary romance, which I think is fun. Because you have your primary romance, and that's where most of your suspense and scary stuff is with. But with a secondary romance, that's where it can just be more comedy. And you'll find that in this one, there is a secondary romance to the kids from the Isle of Secrets. And so I have a lot of fun always putting in a secondary romance. So what I did for this one I'm working on right now, because the main heroine is going to be Princess Lenushka from Norveshka, who is a dragon. But the secondary romance will be Rosalind, who is a princess from Turin. So I'm, you know, knocking out 2 princesses at once. I'm trying to get through as many of them as I can. And so that was the goal there, was to try to get as many, because I know if I leave any of them out, I'm going to get readers. But what about Julia? Julia is actually, that's kind of a joke. If you recall, Brody and Maeve, Brody was the dog shifter, and Maeve, she knew it was a male dog, but she kept calling him Julia when he was a dog, mainly just to irritate him. But they're married, of course, and then they named their daughter Julia, because that's what she was always calling him when he was a dog. But yeah, no, if I don't do Julia, I was what about Julia? And then there's 2 elfin princesses. So even after, if I knock out Lenushka and Rosalind in one go, I still got 3 princesses left. So, and some princes. There's some princes. Yeah. There's yeah, there's yeah, really. I was afraid it might get confusing, especially if you're just starting the series. You're like, who are all these people? So today I had it downloaded on my website, which is kerrelynsparks.com. If you go there to the Embrace section, there is a map that can help, because sometimes, because they're traveling around in this book, and if you're not really sure, you can go to the website and see the map, and that will help you. And I also had downloaded the Royal Families of Erithlin. So it's just a PDF file that if you go to the website, it'll be there on the Brave series where you can click on it, and it'll take you through all the different generations for each country. So if you're having trouble figuring, you know, especially because I think it's been, what, 2 years since the last one came out? So yeah, you probably, even if you knew it all really well at one time, you may have forgotten it. So if you go there, that'll help you keep up with the families and their names of the children. And so that should help you. Any other questions? Because I don't really know. Though I do already have an idea for another bad villain, but I don't know. Because I still have other ideas, that other series that I had thought I would be starting. That one's still bothering me. I would like to do that one, start that one actually, and have it coincide with the vampires. You know, have 2 series that link up. Yeah, I would like to do that.
So what's in your mind in this series that you haven't started yet?
That one, well, I mean, it's kind of your typical good versus evil. That's basically what I
What kind
do.
of creatures are you putting?
But it's more of a, demons loose on the earth, and which is probably true. And but yeah, a bunch of demons have gotten loose on the earth, and of course the angels and trying to catch them, but there would be like a demon hunter type series, but for help, the angels would, because in the Love at Stake books, there were some angels and demons, so they know about them. And so they would try to make allies with them. And that way, then it would cross the two, the series would start crossing. Because, if they ever need help, they could depend on the vampires and the shifters because they know about them. And so that would work. But that's just, it depends on how much energy I have going forward. It's just I know readers want me to write forever, but I don't know. I don't want to write past the point where I can do a good job. I've seen that happen before, where someone you write, and I was a series I was reading, and the woman was in her 90s, and you could tell in the book that she should have retired. They shouldn't have pushed her, and I don't want to be in that kind of a boat. 70 is coming up fast. There are times I feel like I'm 90. Oh, shoot. Anyway. Yeah, lots of ideas, but ideas are cheap and easy. It's the actual work, putting out the 400 pages or so. And yeah, there's still some seats. Come on in.
What do you like to write with?
I tend to write in my recliner with my feet up.
Longhand or on your computer?
Oh, on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like to be comfortable. If I'm comfortable, then my mind I can get more into the book. I'm not thinking, oh, my feet hurt, or, I want to put my feet up, or, I don't have these things, these distracting thoughts I get comfortable. I get in my chair and with a glass of water nearby, and then the hours go by and I don't really realize it. But yeah, writing longhand is good sometimes if I'm really stuck. But I tend to write right onto the computer. And I tend to, every writer has a different style and what works best for them. I'm very OCD, and so I cannot possibly write what most writers call the shitty first draft. I could not do that. I cannot go past chapter 1 until it is polished and I am happy with it. And then the same thing for chapter 2, and so forth. And so I tend to write very in a cyclical fashion, where I'll do chapter 1, and then when chapter 2 comes around, I go back to chapter 1, revise, go into chapter 2. When chapter 3 comes, I go back, I revise, get into that one. And so I keep doing that. Eventually, instead of going back to chapter 1 after, when you're in chapter 10 or whatever, I'm only going back to chapter 5 and going through. And so I circle back around and around. And the good news about that is when I hit the end, it really is the end. because those prior chapters have been edited probably hundreds of times. And so they are shining by the time I get to the end and it is done. And so when I'm coming up on a deadline, I can be writing the last scene the day before the book is due. And when I finish that scene, I'm ready. I can email it off at that point. And it's clean. It's a clean manuscript. Mostly thanks to the papers back there, me and Jay and Sandy, who are always mentioned in the acknowledgements.
Well, your copy editors have told you that.
Yeah.
That you write a really clean book.
Yeah, they're clean. But I mean, that's my OCD showing. I can't. Yeah, if there's mistakes, it drives me crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a perfectionist, but you have to realize that as a writer, you're never going to really reach that perfectionist. What you think the book in your mind should be is never quite there. But you get as close as you can, and at some point you have to let it go. And but that's my style of writing. And any other questions?
So do you outline first?
I have no idea what's happening.
No, she doesn't. She really does.
Yeah, I'm what you call, what is it, a subconscious writer?
Mhm.
I think I have no idea what's going on. And then when we start brainstorming, I'm like, well, this happened, and this happened. They're going, you do know what's going to happen. And I didn't think I did, but
Yes, you do.
yeah, it's, I do a lot of stuff subconsciously. Even with the Love at Stake books, MJ is always talking about the first book of the How to Marry a Millionaire Vampire. There were so many things in there. I mentioned shifters barely, and there were so many clues in there to books later on that I was not even consciously aware I had put in there. So I do write a lot subconsciously. There's something in me just saying, just put that in. And I don't know why. And then later on, books later, all of a sudden, oh yeah, I knew about it back then, but I didn't know I knew about it. So yeah, it's a subconscious type of thing. And I think because I'm a slow writer and I don't rush through the shitty first draft, I think that's why I can do that. Because if you, to me, I just don't even believe in doing it that way. But of course, that works for a lot of authors. But to me, if I rush through that first draft as fast as possible, I'm going from point A to point B as fast as I can. And that is the most logical, boring route. And if you take your time, and like I do, and keep going back and circling back, and then new ideas start coming into your mind, and then all of a sudden from A to B goes all over the place, and it goes places that your reader will never expect. And that is the route I want to take. And it's to me, it's not going to happen if you rush through the book real fast. You know, if you're under deadline, you know, the people that write 4 or 5 books a year, and they've got to get one done every 2 or 3 months. They're in such a hurry. I feel like it to me, their books were probably great, but for me it would not work. It would never be my best. So my best is to take time and to let the unusual come to my mind so that I can take y'all on a more interesting ride on the book rather than the shortcut. Does that make sense? Anything else? I'm so happy with all the people that came. That's one of the big fears as an author, that you'll do something and no one will show up. Yeah, it's a nice crowd. Thank you for coming.
Who are some of the authors you like to read?
Oh gosh.
Because I know you don't read in the genre when you're writing?
No, I missed a whole lot of good vampire books while I was writing vampires because I refused to read it while I was writing them because I didn't want to get, because I'm such a subconscious writer, I was afraid I would subconsciously borrow things without realizing it. So I did not read any vampires or shifter books while I was writing them. I read mostly historical romance. But I read all over the place. Gosh, lately, some of the ones I've been enjoying the most have been young adult. And that may be actually showing up in my writing, because I do see sometimes when people do reviews, they go, it feels kind of like a young adult book, because I do tend to have younger, well, these are medieval type books. And so, yes, I think it's understandable that your heroine may be young, because you know, that just came at the time period or that type of book. But they're young. They tend to be innocent. But to me, that's the time period. You know, that's the way that people were at the time. And then I tend to always have a bad guy, and I have a lot of adventure, which to me, young adult books are high on adventure. There's a big story going on, not just a romance. And so I tend to do that because I enjoy that. I like to go on an adventure. And to me, that's fantasy should be that way. You know, your Lord of the Rings, I'm going on an adventure. I mean, it should be that way. In that sense, they're not a typical romance. I think there's a touch of young adult in there, but I mean there will be some sex scenes, so it is for adults. But you know, I try to put everything in there that I enjoy the most when I'm reading, because I enjoy the romance, I enjoy humor, I enjoy suspense, adventure, a little mystery. Those are all kind of books that I like to read. So I try to throw them all in. But that's the stuff I like. I hate to be too predictable. Of course, I mean, with the romance, some things are predictable. I mean, it's a given that your hero and heroine will be together at the end and be happy. I mean, that's a given. And that the good will defeat evil. That's a given. But I mean, we want that. Yeah, those are good things. That's the good thing about reading romance. You do have that comfort of knowing going in that good will defeat evil and love will conquer all. And those things are very comforting and reassuring, that to know that you're investing your time in and characters that will come through for you, that aren't going to fail. Anything else?
We do have a question from one of our virtual attendees. Emma is asking, will any of Luciana's children have her ability to tell the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Sounds like it hasn't popped through your.
Yeah, it isn't there yet, because I don't know. Eviana really doesn't, but I don't know the boys that well yet. I've been focusing more on the girls. For some reason, I don't know. I feel like the readers would relate more to the girls. Because we're girls. The princesses. But these girls, I think they're stronger, because when you think about it, the girls the 5 sisters that were raised in a convent, they had each other, so they became a family with each other and a good support for each other. But they grew up thinking that their parents had abandoned them, or that they've been cast aside and forgotten, just stuck there on that convent on that island, and didn't know of any future ahead of them. And so they just obviously are not going to have the confidence that these younger generation, these girls have been raised as like Eviana, she's been raised as a princess. She's used to giving orders and getting her way and making decisions for herself and so forth. So it's just, it's different for these girls, the second generation. Any other questions? Have y'all read the first 5 sisters?
Yeah.
You did?
Um,
You haven't?
so,
Is this your first one?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah, if you have trouble keeping up, you might feel like there's a whole lot of names being thrown at you. But yeah, go to my website and look at that list.
so it's like a family tree kind of thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's 5 countries. It'll start like with Eberron, and then it'll actually give you a little history out, because it'll say who was I give several generations. So you'll get King Leo and Luciana, and then who their children are. And then it goes to the next country, Turin, and it'll tell you who the children, the parents, the children, and so forth. And it does it for all 5 kingdoms. And so that will help you. Because there was no way, at this point, I tried my best to limit how many of the kids, because the second generation, what did we say, there was like 13 or so. I didn't put them all in this book because it would be overwhelming. Like, here's 13 new characters all at once, it was just too much. So I introduced a few, and then this second one I'm working on now, more of them are getting introduced because it's Rosalind's big wedding. And they're all the princesses are bridesmaids. So that's what it starts with, the wedding. The ill-fated wedding. And but I did introduce them all at once because I thought it was just going to be too much.
Too overwhelming.
Yeah. I had to come up with a way to limit it.
But you don't have to read the first series, even though it's really good. You can do that. I'll show it for you.
Yeah, I've read a few reviews where people said, you're fine starting with that one.
Okay.
But you will see the parents mentioned, and if you want their romances, you would go back and read the first 5.
Are you having a harder time coming up with names since every royal family has to end in a certain letter or sound or?
Yeah, well, I
Are you
did
kicking
that.
yourself for that?
I did that trying to help. Actually, that was just to try to help the readers keep people straight. Because like in Eberron, King Leo, his full name is Leofric. And so the boys, the princes are Eric and Dominic. And so they all ended with ick. And the king before him was Frederick. It just that just so if you hear that, that's that family. I just tried little tricks like that to help. And I also, because Eviana and Eric are the twins, so I started with both E and let's see. And Turin, the king there, everyone knew him as Rupert, the infamous pirate. His real name was Ulfred, and his son is Rainfred. But if the daughter is Rosalind, so I made it Rainfred and Rosalind. I tried to do things like that. Those are just my little things that just really just it helps me, but I think it should help the reader try to keep people straight. If I try to lump names together, so you can tell. So Silas and Norveshka, his brother was Petrus, his son is Pindrus. Let's see, and the elves, the royal family all has an N sound at the beginning of their name. So there's King Brennan, his son is Brendel. The daughters are Glenda and Kendall. So they all had start rhyme with a rhyme.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I just did things like that to try to help people keep up with the names. And it is becoming more and more difficult when, like right now, I have to come up with some new names. And I tend to go, I think I want to go, oh no, there's already too many names starting with an R. I can't, you know, I'll be going through, will be running down the alphabet in my mind going, well, which letter should this name start with? What letter have I not used yet in this book?
I'll get a baby name book or something.
I do that all the time. I
Well,
usually
you
go
keep
to
everything- keep everything in like a file. I mean, how big is that? I mean, I remember when you started that, it was like, oh, you know, back with the vampire books, and you were like, I gotta start a file because I gotta remember who's where. And I know with this book, I mean, I don't know. How
yeah,
big
the
file
Love at
is now.
Stake. Yeah, there is a cast list on the website, and I think the last count it was like 35 pages or something. It got so big. This one, that was just the royal families. I think it's 3 or 4 pages long. But yeah, but that's not the entire cast list. It's just the royal families. There's lots of secondary characters. But yeah, I do have to keep up with them. And I use baby naming sites, so especially ones that do by ethnicity, because like in Norveshka, their names I tend to use a lot of Russian or Norwegian sounding names. And so, yeah, I'll use different ethnicities for different countries to try to make the name sound a little different.
Emma online again is asking if you have a favorite country in Ireland.
Oh, favorite country. Probably Norveshka. But the elfin country would be nice too. But I mean, I would just, gosh, I'd have to be a snowbird. I would be in Norveshka in the summer. I wouldn't be there in the winter. You know, it's like being in the Alps or something. Yeah, I'd probably be there in the summer. I do like Eviana. She would go to Norveshka every summer. But she's going to be the Duchess of Vindelen, which is on the south coast, and so it has very mild winters. They grow olive trees and stuff there, and lemon trees and stuff. So that would be the place to be for the winter. So yeah, I'd move around. Yeah, the Vindemar Castle, you'll see it in this book because they go south to Vindelen. That was inspired by the Castle Dunnottar in Scotland. It's this castle, you see these ruins of these castles on promontory or just off the coast. It's really beautiful. But when I've used from travels, I used all kinds of inspiration for the books. Like when I was in Tallinn, Estonia, the city hall there was a medieval building that had the gutter pipes were dragon shaped. And I thought that's cool. So I need that for my dragon castle. So I put it in for the dragon Norveshka. So I mean, I was inspired by travels like that. And if you go to my website and look at the map, there are places that if you click on Epton Palace in Eberron, there will be a picture there. The map is sort of interactive. You can travel around and click on places. And the pictures, the photos that come up are photos I have taken in my travels and go, oh, this could be Epton Palace and this would be, you know, Draven Castle or whatever. And so those are pictures I've taken and we use for the map.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions.
One.
Oh,
Yes.
And it's not about the books. I was just wondering, why do you choose this place? I know that you live around Houston, but she said that you've been doing it for 26 books.
Oh, you mean living in
Like, what makes Katie Budget Books so special?
Oh yeah, why are we so
it's my
special?
neighborhood, it's my neighborhood bookstore. Gee, I grew up in Houston. I grew up in Spring Branch, and I've lived in Katy since 1979. So I've been here a long time. So has Katy Budget Books. I first started going to them. They were on Fry Road across the street. They were in the shopping center. And then they moved across and then they moved here. But yeah. I remember that first store, Katy Budget Books, I met Jane Ann Krentz there at a signing. That was before I was writing. Oh my gosh, I thought authors were magical. I was amazed when I ever met a real one, and I had ideas, but I just didn't think I could actually write. And I mean, I didn't start writing till I was like 42, 43. I waited a long time because I didn't believe I could do it. I didn't think I could pull it off. But then when I finally started trying, I sold a book in 2 years. It can happen. But yeah, I remember meeting her there, and yeah, Katy Budget Books, I've known them for many, many years. And so, of course, it was, I had shopped there for many years. So then it was a real honor to actually be the author there.
No, you're one of our magical authors.
I just didn't even think people, they were real back then. I thought they all lived in Scotland in a castle. Yeah, and they just, I just didn't think it was something that I could do. I was a high school teacher before that. I taught American history and French. But after the third child, daycare was more than I was going to probably making. And also, because I was working at that time, I was working at a magnet school in HISD, and it was an hour away. I was way too terrified, really, of being an hour away from my children when they were young, if anything happened to them. And actually, I mean, any of you, if you teach school, you know what it's like. Once you're there for the day. And you don't just up and leave. Oh, I have an emergency, I have to go. You don't, it would have taken me hours to get home. And I wasn't making enough for really to be worth all that. And so I decided to stay home. We all decided. My husband was happy for me to stay home, and the children were happy. Everybody was happy. I was happy too. But it was just eventually you want something to occupy your mind a little bit. Changing diapers is not really brainy work. You want I wanted something to occupy my mind more, and something challenging to do. And by the time but I kept putting it off. I had a need to be creative, but I do a lot of crafts and sewing and stuff like that. And so I was actually putting all my creativity into that. My daughter was the best dressed kid in elementary school. She had beautiful dresses, so cute back then. A little pantaloons and stuff, like that country look. Oh gosh, she was so cute. But she grew up. She didn't want to wear that stuff anymore. And I'm like, I got to, and in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, I have these ideas I need to write, but I just didn't think I could do it. And so I kept procrastinating for years. It was, I think, it was like my 42nd birthday when I finally gave myself a really hard talk, to myself, like, you're getting up there and you have this dream and you still haven't done it. And And if you keep this up, you're going to be on your deathbed someday and wonder, why didn't I at least try? I should have tried. Even if I didn't make it, I could at least say, well, I gave it my best shot. I tried. But at this point, I couldn't even say that. I just was letting fear stop me. So I decided at that point that I needed to try. I didn't even have a computer back then. I mean, my son had one, and I used his while he was at school. And he had to teach me how to use it. So I wrote my first book completely longhand using old spiral notebooks that were left over from, the kids at the end of the year. They would have a pile of spiral notebooks left with, 10 pages in this one and 15 pages in this one, and you don't want to throw it away because it's perfectly good paper, but who needs 10 pages? And so my first book, I used up all the old spiral notebooks, and then a stack of spiral notebooks. By the time I typed it in, it was like 500 pages long. And it was never sold. But that was my training. That was my learning exercise. As a writer, it is never wasted time or wasted effort, because it's always your part of your learning curve. So I learned on that first book. The second book I sold. So it was a King Arthur book. I think everybody has a King Arthur book. But no, that one, it never sold. Thank goodness. But no, the second one sold. It was a historical, actually. Yeah, it was American Revolution set era. But I was so naive at the time, I didn't realize that it was very difficult to sell a book in that time period, because everyone wants Regency, Bridgerton, Regency, and Victorian times, and that's what the publishers are mostly looking for historical romance. But I did manage to sell that one.
And it's still available online.
Yes, it is. It is. It was a really cute book. He was the James Bond of the American Revolution. He had all kinds of neat gadgets, like Inspector Gadget. I grew up with my son watching Inspector Gadget, and it crept in. And actually, I think the whole James Bond thing was because I was using my son's computer, and I was trying to type up something, and he was in the room playing a James Bond video game. And so while the whole time I'm typing, I'm hearing the da 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 da, behind me. And I ended up with a James Bond character, a secret spy with all kinds of gadgets that were for the time period. But it was really fun. He had like a little submarine even, because James Bond has to have a submarine. But it was and it's real. It's based on a true story. They had a turtle. They called it the Turtle, and it was the first submarine, and it actually did sink a British ship during the American Revolution. But it was it was my level of technical prowess, because I could understand it, because the guy inside did it. He made it go with a bicycle. It was a bicycle thing that he rode inside, and that's how he powered it. I mean, I could understand that. And they did have luminescence back then, and so they used luminescence so you could see the controls, but there weren't many controls. I mean, it was like up or down, and if you ran out of air, you just ran out of air, and it was adios. So yeah, it was. But I could understand this machine. So yeah, it's in the book. That was a fun book, and it did sold. It sold, and that was actually my first published book. So I did do a sequel to it later on. But those are my two historical books. I just realized at some point, because these historical books are set in America, and they're self-made men, and that's just more my type of guy in a way. For Regency, I love Regency. I love to read them, but I just could not for the life of me come up with ideas about dukes and stuff. It just wasn't there. But but I have fun. I have a go good time with this fantasy world with the royalty. But to me, these guys are like Leo. He was an outcast, so they're more self-made men too. None of them have been born into luxury. Let's see. Yeah, I had the 2 historicals, but they didn't really go over that well. Then I had this epiphany. I realized that most of my favorite historicals had paranormal elements to them. It's like some of the Jude Devereaux time travel things, or those were my favorite. My favorite historicals were actually paranormal. I realized then, I'm like, well, I should try paranormals. And so I came up with a crazy idea with the vampire losing his tooth and needing a dentist. And I remember telling my critique partners, I'm going to write vampires. And they said, are you crazy? And I said, no, you can't do that. You write nice people. And I said, well, I'll make them nice vampires. And they were nice vampires. But yeah, that's when my career took off at the vampires, especially the Scottish ones. That just really went over well. So I think I'm talking a lot. I'm talking a lot.
You ready to start signing?
I guess so. How do you want to do this poster?
Oh, yeah.
There's a poster.
It's not for this book.